Hey everyone, welcome back to the web design decal. This is a re-record from last night because unfortunately the recording got messed up. And also I wanted to clarify some things and go over Windows controls for Figma as well. So as you can see, there's kind of a lot to look at so far. We have the top menu, this left-hand side menu, and a right-hand side menu. And as we'll go through, you'll soon be acquainted with most of the important features in Figma. So let me get started. I want to preface it with saying that in the Figma file, it says, please no steal, and that just means please don't use this graphic or illustration or these screens in your portfolio, but we do want you to use the assets that are provided when you are doing your lab submission. Yeah, we'll talk about that more and what you need to do for the lab as we go through. So let's start with keyboard shortcuts and how I've been navigating around the screen. So to zoom in and out and kind of pan around, you can just use 2 fingers on your trackpad, and as you can see, I can move back and forth pretty easily and zoom in and out pretty easily as well. You can also do Command plus and minus, and that will bring you in and out at specified increments. And I think on Windows, it's just plus and minus without hitting anything else. Yeah, you can also hold down spacebar, and that will allow you to pan around the page at the same level of zoom. You can also do that by clicking on this hand tool in the top left bar. This top left bar, it has pretty much all of the most important features that you'll be using to make any of your designs. So the first one over here is your regular selection tool. It's just the cursor that allows you to click on things, text, move stuff around, etc. F, or this symbol here, is the frame tool. And a frame is basically the surface on which you design on, and you want it to be the same shape and size as the screen or thing you're designing for in general. There are some more complicated uses of it when you get into prototyping, but we will not be covering that in this class for now. So if you hit F, you see on the right-hand side, you have all these different options for types of frames that you can have. So you can have it fit within certain dimensions of computer screens, tablet screens, phone screens, or various paper and then social media types of posts. You can also make it custom and kind of draw it as if you would draw a rectangle or anything else. Speaking of rectangles, that is our next tool, and it's right up here. This is, in general, the different shape tools that you have. There's a drop down here for rectangles, lines, arrows, ellipses, polygons, and stars. I don't really use the line or arrow controls that much because I'd rather use the pen tool, which we'll cover more later. And I also don't use this place image function because I like to copy paste in my images instead, but it's just a personal preference. So yeah, the shortcut for rectangles is R. You just hold down R and you have these kind of crosshairs, and you just click and drag to make it a rectangle. And then the O, same thing. You click and drag to make ellipses, ovals, and circles. So to get a perfect square or a perfect circle, you would hold down Shift while using those. Next, we have the pen tool, which allows you to draw lines and create organic shapes. And I'll show you more in a second on how you want to use that. Yeah. If you use Shift in combination with the pen tool, it'll give you straight lines, even angles, so 45, 90, 180, etc. And that's really helpful. Then T is text. That's pretty self-explanatory. You draw a text box and you type in it. We'll go through how you use all of those in the next few exercises. Then for a little bit more complex of tools, a little bit more complex of shortcuts. These are all available through a 2-finger click or right click on your mouse or trackpad, and it'll all come up in this menu. But if you rather have the keyboard shortcut, it's here. So if you want to group items together, which basically makes them all controlled at the same time, so you only have to click once to move them around, you do Command G, or you select all of them and go through this menu. If you want to ungroup those items because you want to work with them more individually, Command Control G is what you use. So basically the opposite. Over here we have the Windows shortcuts instead. I'm not going to go super in depth on what those are, but you can screenshot it now, and I'm also going to post both the keyboard shortcut pages on Piazza after this. Yeah. Then Command Option K is to create component. Option Command brackets to bring to front and bring to back. That's just controlling the order of things. Then this kind of like exponent character, Command M for use as mask. We'll cover what that is later. And blocking and framing selection are also a little bit advanced, but since you probably don't have time to go over all of this, go ahead and experiment in your free time. These are just so that you can look at them for the future. So let's get into typography in Figma. So you're going to hit T or click on the T that's up here to use the text box tool. And you drag in the box generally the size and shape that you want. And you just type in what you want it to say. And now clearly this isn't the same font as it is over here. So I'm going to go over to the right-hand menu, and there is a subsection for text, and you have all of these cool options available to you. I can either select the font by going into this drop-down menu, or I can just type in the font, and since I know what it is, that's easy enough for me to do. Here I can do the drop-down menu for size, or I can use the arrow keys. To change the size. I could have also just typed in the number that I was looking for if I knew it. And change the line weight. And then this kind of changes line height in terms of spacing. That's with this example. And the spacing between each letter, so kind of extending how wide words are and how spaced out each letter is. And there's a bunch of other things for you to explore there. I got this filler text. We tend to use lorem ipsum for that because it's very convenient. It doesn't really mean anything for filler text. So I got it from loremipsum.io, and I just copied in some of the filler text. And all I'm going to do here is play around with the different line heights. You can also type in a percentage or an exact number of pixels in between each line. That's pretty much what you need to get from that. Moving on to shapes. Let's practice with the rectangle and ellipse tools. So hitting R or clicking up there in the top left. You can just draw a rectangle by holding down and dragging. And I want it to have no fill and just have a black outline. So I reselect it after drawing it, and on the right hand side there's a fill section, and I can just hit this minus sign to make it transparent, and then hit a plus sign to give it a stroke. And if I wanted to after, I can change the color of those by clicking this. So you can also change the corner radius to basically making the edges of the corners of a rectangle rounded. So I'm just going to, I'm going to copy this box and then select it, and as you zoom in on it, you'll see that there are these circles that show up, and if you just pull on them, you can see that the corners become more rounded, and soon it'll just become one dot in between them. And now you have this kind of button shape that's fairly common. So now we can make our own buttons by doing the same thing. And then you can also see that these red guidelines come up as I move shapes around, and those show up to help you align things properly. So the red line going vertically is helping me center it. The one horizontally is helping me center it that way. There's also a menu on the top right side when you have objects selected that allow you to align in different ways. And if you have more than one object selected, so let's say I select all of these, you can distribute them equally across a certain amount of space. And that's super useful. So going back to making this button, I want the button to be this color, right? So on the right-hand side in the fill section, I'm going to click on the color and then use this eyedropper tool and click in here. Clearly, you can also drag around this dot to change the color, type in a hex code, move along this bar to change what color you're focusing on. And you can also do types of gradients. And that's very useful. So now it is this green color. Now we want to add the explore text. So I'm just going to draw a text box on top of it and write explore. And we want the font size to be smaller, so I'm going to make it 14 or so. And I'm going to center align it and align the text within the middle of the text box. And now it is, and then drag it to make sure it's centered with the box that it's in. And I'm going to make it regular instead of bold and give it a white fill. So it also will try to help you evenly space it with other things that will let you know how many pixels are in between certain objects. And you can hold down Option or Alt if you're using Windows, and if you roll over other objects or just the background, it'll let you know how far away your object is from the edges or from the secondary object that you're rolling over. And that's super helpful for making sure that everything you have is in the right position and where you want it to be. but we want it to have this cool little shadow. So we're going to go back to the right-hand side menu and scroll down to almost the bottom where it says effects and hit the plus sign, and it'll automatically give you this little drop shadow. So now those are the same pretty much. And you can change the settings of it, what direction it goes in, how dark it is. I tend to feel like that this is already good and I wouldn't want more or less of it. And I'm just going to keep it like that. So then for ellipses, pretty much works the same way. This is an ellipse. And I'm going to fill it in this yellow. You'll also notice in this menu that it shows all of the colors or the most recent colors that you've used while editing the document, and that's helpful. But we'll cover more of that kind of stuff in a second. So next, let's draw a circle. I mentioned earlier, if you use Shift in combination with the shape tools, you can create circles and squares. So you can hit O and hold down Shift while we drag for the circle, and you want to let go of your trackpad or your mouse first before the shift, or else it won't actually be even. And there, now you have a circle. And I'm going to make it the same yellow. And now to make this Pac-Man kind of shape, I'm going to copy paste this circle. When I click on it, there's this white dot that shows up, kind of similar to how the dot showed up on the rectangle to make the corners rounded. We can just drag that along to make the Pac-Man shape. And Figma has this really cool feature that allows you to edit shapes as if it's a file or a pen tool path, which I will show more of in a second. But if you double click on a shape, it'll have all these different points, and you can play around with and distort it how you want it to. But a cool little hack that I like to use in my own design is I'm going to give it a stroke so you can see better what I'm doing. But Apple Watches have these kind of arc shapes that they use about your progress and fitness and everything. And those can be fun to design. So if you select this center dot and just hit the backspace, you've deleted it, and all you have is now this arc. And done. You have this arc that's kind of in the same shape. And if you change the thickness, let's bring that down a little bit. And I'll cover more of what I'm doing here when we cover pen tool. And now it really does look like the Apple tool. Okay. Let's hope that I can beat the sun going down. Let's talk about the pen tool. So hit P, and then in order to make a point, you just click, and then to make another point, you put it where you want it to be and click again. And there will be guides to show you to make it straight. Or you can go outside of that. The red X's will show up in the dot to make when it's aligned, and that's very handy. And then you hit done whenever you're done with the thing that you're drawing. And then you have that shape. So now to edit the stroke of your pen drawing, there's the stroke menu on the right side. And if you hit, you can change whether or not the line goes in the center of the path that you drew on the inside or on the outside. You can change the width of the stroke. And you can change what the corners look like, which now they're rounded. And you can also change how the stroke ends if you haven't closed your shape. All very helpful. So now we can make a rhombus using, or a parallelogram under the same idea. There's a shape, and then you can plus sign on fill, minus on the stroke, and make it the same color. And I'm not going to go over how to do the dog in this video, and nor did I record it, but it is a very advanced thing. Do not worry if you can't do this, and don't worry about doing it at all. It's just an extra challenge for those who want it. And please don't use it in your portfolio and claim credit for it. Thank you. So moving on to assets and components. So you can save certain styles for repeatability, such as specific colors. You can see that I have a bunch here for the next activity for your lab, and you can save certain text styles, which is line weight, height, or font size, and the font are all saved within that text style. And that's very useful when designing, because then you can easily see how many different colors you've used, what your palette is, and you don't have to figure out what it is every time. And it's really easy to change what these colors are as well. Everything of that color will just change it if you edit it here, and that's super helpful. So we're going to practice adding those. So we want to add this red color to styles. You're going to go over to fill and don't hit the plus sign, even though it's tempting. That is for making gradients. You're actually going to go to these 4 dots over here and then hit the plus sign, and then you can name your color whatever you want. And I'm going to name it cranberry because it reminds me of cranberries. And now I have it in my color styles. And it's when I'm not selecting anything, it'll show up in this menu. When I am selecting something, let's get rid of that for now. I can either go to document colors or this drop down menu and then hit local colors and it'll show up here. Or I can go to the 4 dots and select it from there as my color. And that makes it so that everything is even and uniform throughout what you're designing, and the design is consistent, which is good. And yeah, we can do the same thing with this text. In the text menu, there's also the similar 4 dots, and you can hit the plus sign, and let's call it JoJo's. Okay, I wasn't beating the sunlight, so I had to go turn the light on again. But now, as you can see, that we have saved both this color in this text style. They're both showing up in this right-hand side menu when I'm not selecting anything. And that's good. So now you can have that same idea of keeping things uniform and being able to repeat a certain style with an object. So say you want to use buttons of a certain format throughout your whole site, you can create a component that is repeatable, and that allows you to make those buttons uniform throughout the whole site. It'll keep like the color and everything the same. So we're going to select the text and the button, and then either hit this button up top or use the keyboard shortcut I mentioned earlier, or do the right click on it to create component. And it'll show up as this like purple thing within layers, which I'll explain momentarily. But basically you can copy this, and if you change the master one, it'll change the other buttons. But if you change it from one of the instances of it, it won't change the master one. And that's super convenient for when you want to make large changes to a very organized design system. But we're going to delete this for now. On the left-hand side, you can select assets instead of layers, which is automatically on, and it'll tell you it'll let you know what components you have in this local components tab, and it'll let you know which frame it's in as well. And you can rename it and everything. You can also import components from other Figma files, but that's a little bit more advanced than we're going in this tutorial. So back to layers, because this is going to be important in the next section. It kind of looks a little disorienting right now, but if I close all of them, you can see that these bolded ones, or bolded text on the side, refers to the titles of each of the frames, and when you roll over it, you roll over it, you'll see that it's highlighted there. And in general, when you roll over something within the layers, it'll highlight what it is in the workspace as well. And what layers does basically is shows the order of which things are put on the page, and if you change this around, you can change how things appear, and it also shows you what's within each frame, and that's super useful for designing things, keeping track of where everything is, and in general, where things are. So we're going to start on the next activity right now that we've covered the basics. So I went through the process of designing this travel resort website for this island called Rumblecusp from Critical Role, of which I'm a huge fan of the show. But yeah, I wanted to show an example of going through the design process, or at least part of it. So first I have the low fidelity prototype, and then I have a mid fidelity prototype, and then the high fidelity prototype. And you can kind of see the progression between or across those. And I have some inspiration and crediting of the stock images I used, just in case you want to see how I've used inspiration for my work. So let's start transferring this to make it into this, which is what you're going to do for the assignment. So we're going to drag over this illustration that I made in Figma, and you can see, hang on, I'm going to bring it closer so you can see it a little bit better. When I drag it over, you can see that these little red X's show up in the corner, similar to when I was using the pen tool, and that shows that I'm aligned with the corners correctly. And now this illustration is where we want it to be. So we're going to copy over this text because we want it to be in this similar place. If we zoom in here, you can see that the text is actually nested between the volcano and the smoke in this illustration. So we're going to try to achieve that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the text Rumblecusp and copy it. And then we're going to scroll back over to the screen that we're working on, click on the title of this frame and paste it. And it'll appear within the same place that it did in the frame that we got it from. And that's a super useful way to copy stuff over, in especially between prototypes, so that you don't have to worry about re-spacing everything and making sure it's even. So currently it's just on top of this illustration, and let's just expand this group so that we can take a look at it. You can see everything in the illustration in order and them being highlighted on the screen of what their actual shape is. And we want this to be in between the volcano and the smoke. So I have that specifically labeled here. So all we have to do is click on Rumblecusp and then drag it down, and here it'll just stay at the same place, but now it's quite a few layers down and it's part of this group. And now that everything is selected, or yeah, everything is selected in here, so we can just treat it as one instance. And that's super helpful. I'm not going to go over every single part of how to do this, but let's just do a couple starter things. So let's take this nav bar. In order to select more than one thing at a time, you hold down Shift and you click on the things that you want to copy over. So I did the nav bar and this little arrow that would be clicked on if this were a real interactive site. And then you want to copy it, go back to high fidelity, and then paste it, and it'll appear in the same spot that we want it to be in. And then we're going to change the color to dark, which I have saved, and then stroke is dark. You have to be careful about selecting text and pen tool drawings, because this is a pen tool drawing, because the fill on text and the stroke on text are different, and in general it's safer to just do those two things individually. So now also we want to add the drop shadow here, and you remember that all you have to do is hit the plus sign in the effects submenu. Cool. It's starting to look like the final product already. So let's move over everything else. I'm going to unlock these. So what locking does is that it means that I can't click on these or edit them, and that's helpful when you're trying to move stuff around on top of it, or you're trying to make sure that certain parts that you've already designed are not disturbed. But we're going to unlock them so that we can use them. Okay, cool. And then we're going to select everything. This time, instead of shift clicking everything, I just highlighted it, which is another thing that you can do. And then I'm going to copy it, do the same thing by clicking high fidelity and pasting it over. And it's already in the perfect spot. So now I want to change the background of the frame. So we're going to click on the title high fidelity, and now we have control over the frame. You can see it has all of these portions here. Yeah, we can go to fill and select dark as well, and now it is in the correct color. I'm not going to go over the recoloring of the text because I'm sure you guys can do that, but I am going to go over how to make one of these images the way I have done it. And it's pretty straightforward, and it uses a couple new features, but you'll basically do that for all of these shapes that are on the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this card first, and we're going to select this rectangle that's here, and we're going to right click or do the use as mask keyboard shortcut. We're going to click on that. You can also press this button beforehand, but you'll notice that everything else that was over here is now gone. And before you panic, look over at the layers page. What the mask function does is it makes sure that anything that is above it, well, basically it hides anything that comes above it in the layers, except for the things that are directly over top of this shape. But we don't want it to hide all of these other boxes. So what we're going to do is we're going to group it with itself. And now you have a group, and you can control what goes directly above this shape very easily. if you think about this, it's just a different way of cropping images that's a lot more flexible and allows for easy planning before and after what you have. So if you forget that that's there, you can just roll over the layers and it'll show up again. But this is the image that we're going to use. I'm going to cut Command X and then paste it in. As you can see, it kind of pastes just in the center of the screen because all of these images are outside of any frame. So they don't really have a designated place to go. And then, like how we did with putting Rumblecusp in the illustration, we're going to drag the image down into the group that we want it to go in. And you're like, oh no, the image still isn't showing up. And that's because it's still at the center of the page and it's not directly over the mask shape. So if we drag it over, now we can see the image. Oops, I dragged it over too far. And then basically you've cropped the image to that shape and size. But this is still kind of hard to make contrast with the text that we're going to put on top. So what we're going to do, it's kind of a hack. We're going to draw a rectangle that is at least the same size as the mask shape rectangle. And we're going to select dark and then drag it down a bit more so it's like darker than the shade that we were using. And then this second bar here changes the opacity. It makes the things more transparent. And then whatever's behind it, you can see. So this kind of acts as a filter. And I'm going to put it around this. And there's kind of this line on top. So just to make sure, I could make it the same size easily, but a way that I don't have to worry about the size of my rectangle, or if I want to change the size later and I want to make a larger rectangle to accommodate for that, I can just drag this down into the mask as well. So every time I change the size and shape of the mask, it'll just fit to whatever I have within the mask. So now we want to add if we look up above on this card, we have some text, the Fa20 Treehouse Villas, this line, and it also says a luxurious place to call home. So we can put that all in here now. So we're going to make the line, we're going to use the pen tool, and it's from about there to there, and I'm gonna hit V, increase the line weight to 3, make it accent color 2, and then hit done. Oops. Yeah, and currently it's quite low down on the page, but what we're going to do is drag it above here, and now we can see it. Sometimes it draws in strange places, but don't worry, if you look over on the side, you'll be able to find it most of the time. So now we're going to do the text. I'm going to draw another text box, decrease the size because it takes the text style of the most recent thing, and I'm going to pick subheading because that's what it is, and type Fa20 Treehouse. And then I'm going to do this left align. Fix the text box a little bit and then bring it down. And the fill is just white. And it's already looking pretty promising. I'm also going to bring this into the same group just so I can move everything around together with ease. We're going to make another text box below it. And Oops. We are going to disband that style so that we can pick in this version I don't have it, so we're going to pick it by hand. And it is Roboto at size 14 in regular, and I'm going to add that really quickly to my text styles as subtext. Very helpful. Oops. There we go. Okay. Don't forget to write stuff before Xing out of that. Luxurious place to call home. Maybe this is size 12. Yeah, that looks more correct. So now what I'm going to do is drag it down a little bit. You can see these guides are here, making sure I align it properly. And then I'm going to change the fill to this off-white color. And now we have that card, and you can do that for all of the other images that are on this page. One more detail though, we're going to select the whole group and then add the drop shadow for just some extra pizzazz. So then if you want to export this after you've completed the whole lab, you've put in all the images, you've done the extra thing that was in the instructions on the downloaded lab, you can click on title and then go down at the bottom of the right-hand menu and hit plus on export, and just export it like this. But you can also do it in other formats, other sizes. For this assignment, just export it at 1x PNG, and the menu will come up to help you with that. To share the link, you go up to this button that says share, and make sure it says anyone with a link can view. You copy the link and you post it into your HTML code. And then one more thing that I want to show, block this so that we can view it. You can select a frame or an image, and actually I think I have to put a frame around this. And I can do that by doing frame selection, something that was on the original page that you don't have to worry about too much. But now this has a frame around it. There's this play button in the top right-hand corner. It's present, and basically you can preview things in their size. Wait for it to load in. And now you can see things as they're going to show up on a screen. And you can scroll through and look at all the different sections of this site. But yeah, I hope this was helpful, and have a good rest of your week and a great weekend. Bye guys.